Who doesn't love being sunburned? Hey everyone, Kyle from Cosplays from Trash, and I'm continuing the trend of having interesting stuff in the background. Researchers have found out the more people that subscribe, the better the background gets. These are rules that I don't understand, but that's just how it works. As much as I like doing Trash After Dark stuff like this month's Energizer Bunny photo shoot, at CFT we are all about trash and cosplay and Cosplays from Trash. I feel like I say that a lot, and it's like still surprises people what I do. There's many different facets to a cosplay community. Ultimately, conventions are really more than a place to just celebrate fandoms. They're third spaces. For the longest time, all you had to do to kind of participate in a convention and to be a part of it was simply to be there. With social media often being a outward facing journal or kind of expose of someone's life. Even if people didn't mean it to be, social media has definitely made conventions more of a contest than anything. It doesn't matter what fandom or what community you're part of. We have seen a shift as social media increases, exacerbated by the pandemic. Communities that are online are not always a one-to-one translation of communities in person. One of my biggest fears is that these once inclusive environments are kind of turned into clout competitions, or where people are constantly just justifying what they're doing and it's all about competing against others. We need to reclaim these spaces to make sure that things like connection and creativity and community thrive more than anything else. Third space is a term that gets thrown around a lot. It was coined by sociologist Ray Oldenburg. If you have your first place, which is your home, and your second place, which is your work, a third place is just some other place that you can be, mostly in relation to a social environment. It's a pretty nebulous term, but it basically just means places where people can come together: community centers, churches, parks, libraries, and to an extent even coffee shops as well. It's just a place to exist and be. Conventions naturally excel at third spaces. They foster creativity, spontaneous conversation, shared experiences. When done right, they really become sanctuaries from people from all walks of life can come together and feel like they belong. Conventions became a place to gather and to be and to create and just enjoy. Whether you're a cosplayer, a gamer, an artist, or anything else, cons provide an environment to connect with others through shared passions. And basically, come as you are, and that's valid. For the longest time, conventions were a place where you could go and enjoy as little or as much of something, and there was no obligation really to do anything or prove anything to other people. Obviously, some things like workshops will have a price associated with it. Cosplay competition, the point is to have the best craft. Those are really just like small subsections of conventions overall. What I'm saying is that just to kind of go into it exist, you've never had to justify your being at a convention. And you have just as much right as everyone else in the community to be there, learn, connect, grow, thrive, and have fun. Libraries are probably one of the best examples because oftentimes you don't even have to have a library card to go and enjoy things. You can just go read a book, look around, sit there for a while, work on your laptop. Emphasis on just being there. Conventions are truly about a wide reach of inclusivity as possible. Often third spaces are quote unquote free, and while conventions aren't 100% free, I think a lot of these points still translate pretty well. Fandoms really transcend barriers like age, background, race, social status, like sexual orientation. At conventions, you are a person first. Oftentimes, marginalized groups, for equity purposes, one of the biggest equitable things is literally just being a space where you are not attacked or downtrodden or having your rights stripped away or anything like that. You are truly just allowed to, it doesn't really matter what your background is, you can just come and enjoy. You can break what makes a third space into like 4 different pillars, and each one of those is very present at cons. We have inclusivity, spontaneity, the embellishment and creation of creative spaces and energy, and then also the spaces being safe. If the space didn't exist, it'd be very hard for people to connect and do things like that. Having this open, no judgment space allows people to not really be too concerned on if they're good enough at something or if they know enough of something to be part of that fandom. And kind of circling back with the inclusivity piece, they are huge safe spaces for people. As a society, we have a lot of places that naturally exist for people of different types of demographic background. A really good example of this is in school, we are traditionally segregated by gender, and you have something in common with everyone that you've kind of been squished together with. Based off how our society has decided to divvy up parts of the population, cisgender people typically have a lot of places where they can just be and be surrounded by other cis people. Like a community of cis people naturally exists because of the population numbers and how society is built. A lot of marginalized groups do not naturally have that because for a variety of reasons, social stigmas, population disparity, or population differences, those communities don't organically exist inside society right now. And cons as third spaces, those bring together just about every niche slash marginalized slash small slash underrepresented slash community that doesn't have a space to be. At a convention, you can find your tribe. And more importantly, you can find your tribe without judgment. If you quote unquote belong to the societal norm, there already are spaces that are carved out for you. I use gender as an example because that is something how a lot of like schools are segregated. But you know, in a society that's very sports prominent, there are a lot of places where liking sports, like you're already going to have that community. There are bars dedicated to just sports, and that is definitely a privilege that I have of being able to go pretty much anywhere in America. And like, I would like to go to a bar and watch sports. Like that exists. If a space does not exist for a marginalized community, you can make that space, and I don't want to say there's nothing anyone can do about it, but like you automatically have that community there. That's really important both on the personal and societal level. Conventions have a huge impact on the personal level because it gives validation, it gives entertainment, it gives belonging, it gives acceptance, but also on societal level, literally we are strengthened by community and diversity and having people with different ideas and people talking to each other and not having a lot of regulation on just a place to create. Conventions without pretense and letting a lot of things be so fan controlled where you are allowed to be spontaneous and create and learn and connect, you can bring that community back with you online or back to like wherever you physically are. And all of that started because there was a space for you to do that. That's basically the gist of human history. A lot of things have come about because people that are passionate about something similar enough have found spaces so that they can aggregate their ideas and like build things together. I mean, ultimately, what I'm trying to say is conventions are some of the few spaces that people feel fully comfortable expressing themselves and finding other people that are similar to them. Not to sound too meta, but we like need that as a society because that's like how things get better and we learn and grow. I sound like a commercial during COVID, but COVID really is unprecedented times where we have some level of restriction of in person contact, but we have this much non in person contact. It really is a novel time in human history. And so, an increase in social media and then also an increase of population and connection, it's losing conventions was more damaging than people realize. When things do migrate online, there is not as much spontaneity, there's not as much inclusiveness, there's not as much participation when you are blocked by a computer monitor. And when we like returned to conventions, people were so siloed. Getting back to the whole spontaneity and inclusivity definitely got harder. I think social media is a great tool, especially when used correctly. But when so many people are experiencing cons or the idea of cons or have a build up to go back because they want to go to a con for the first time, when everything is filtered through a reel or a TikTok, it doesn't paint a true representation of what a con is. It definitely gives the perception like to be a con participant, you have to do what you see online. Having a TikTok or a reel or something to like show that you were there, it naturally is becoming some sort of competition. I mean, this is basically a real life example of the logical fallacy, no true Scotsman, where it's like, well, you didn't really go to the convention if you didn't get a reel. You really didn't go to the convention if you didn't get a picture in the specific gazebo. You know what con I'm talking about. And since largely cons are about getting together and having a valid experience, if you had a very small meetup and only a couple people came or only one other person recognized your costume, someone else says, oh, that wasn't a real meetup. Or like, you didn't really have a community, there needs to be more people. That is just creating these arbitrary rules that are starting to exclude things and silo things is like antithetical to what cons are. While cons have always been a place where you can show off your costume, cons migrated more to a advertisement for online rather than just another space. I mean, to an extent, even like really informal things have turned into some sort of competition. Because upon returning to conventions, a lot of these established groups really formed natural cliques. Having friends and obviously having a group and having, you know, your core squad, there's nothing wrong with that. But when that takes precedence over inclusivity and other people start to feel lesser because they are not doing the quote unquote correct things or not doing enough, the whole point of a convention being an open space turns into a competition that isn't supposed to exist in the first place. The two biggest things you definitely hear is someone isn't a true fan because they don't know some useless piece of trivia, or someone can't cosplay something because, I don't know, someone says they're too fat or something. Like, those are both needless. Like, someone is allowed to like a fandom just as much as someone else, even if they aren't as immersed into the product. Similarly, just because of your body size or body, it doesn't mean you're not allowed to cosplay as somebody. If you walk into a convention for the first time and you are not allowed to participate or told that you're doing something wrong, well, first of all, there are no rules, so that's a very complicated thing, and that is a self-fulfilling cycle, because where do you look? Because there aren't any rules to conventions, people end up looking to social media to see what a larger population is doing or what is cool, so people will try to follow trends, and then it'll be like an infinite cycle of like whatever is being produced online, that is what you should replicate to have the good con experience. And then if you whatever you can glean from a con, if that is something that you can take away and show that you actually went to the con and prove that you were there, it's going to constantly feed on itself and ultimately be a worse experience for everyone, because it turns things that aren't supposed to be competitions into contests. If this trend continues, conventions really risk losing their role as third spaces, as community spaces, as someone where you can just go and be. As someone who is a semi-public figure who hosts cosplay competitions and competes in them, and then also hosts panels and like guests at conventions, one thing I first realized is you cannot control what other people think. You are never going to be able to completely control how someone perceives you. My main focus on what I am presenting is a level of inclusivity, because I never want someone to see my costume and think they can't do that, whether that is a guest spot or physically building something. I know that almost sounds silly to say, but I have heard multiple times people say that they could never get into cosplay because they can't do what I do. Some people have even like rejected the idea of working out because they are not built in a certain way. Specifically, it's a comparison towards me. This is supposed to be fun, and like if you are just kind of get it really a comparison in your mind, look, the internet's already a really sad place sometimes. Like in trying to like create a community, I think one thing of doing that is making people feel validated, worthy, and not feel like crap or like less than. I will never not talk to someone at my table. I'll go horse at conventions because I would much rather talk and provide some level of like entertainment, whether that's with connection or one of the games that we provide, because I'm so passionate about these places remaining this. I never want someone to feel that like when they see me based off like an aura that I'm giving out, that I am unapproachable or I am better than somebody. Like people are going to twist what you say and people are going to not like you, and all of that you can't really control what someone feels about you. But I do think that one of the few things that you can control is how open and inclusive you are. Whether that's through body language or words or actions, there are clear ways that you can shove people aside, either literally or metaphorically. I've been a little doom and gloom about like conventions are no longer being third spaces. Ooh. I think that it is definitely a community effort. You do need to be the change that you want to see at conventions, because since it is so community focused and there aren't really rules for how to be, we need to continue to be in the most inclusive and open way that we possibly can, so that conventions can beget other good experiences. Ultimately, the main way that we can keep conventions as third spaces is prioritizing the inclusivity and making sure that they're environments that are going to be inclusive. I know that was kind of a tautology, but I know that metrics dictate that certain people with certain amount of followers, that is the quote unquote best advertisement that someone can have when they have featured cosplayers. There needs to be a greater focus on quote unquote smaller creators. I love places that do fan tables. There's a lot of different metaphors that you can have here, but it's almost like if you only listen to the next suggested song on Spotify. Sure, that may be good, but there are going to be other songs that you like. I'm not saying those other songs are going to be better or you shouldn't listen to the popular stuff. When we only focus on like popularity as being the driving point for a lot of events at conventions, we don't allow other things to start. Some of the conventions that I like that have the best kind of like guest lineups are people of all different quote unquote sizes. You'll have the extremely popular people, but then you also have other creators that may have a smaller following. It's a space for people to give their ideas. A social media following does not dictate the quality of the content that someone is producing. So if you limit yourself on size, and this can go both directions, like if you only had small creators versus only large, I feel like you should always have a variety of very large cosplayers to very small. The point of doing that is to help foster a lot of the creativity and spontaneity that is done by a lot of other people. Using myself as an example, the number of people that have been quote unquote blown away by what I do, even though I'm a smaller creator, I think that that's really important at places like cons. Someone that is popular should be celebrated because they're probably popular for a good reason. If the only types of creators that are kind of showing up at cons are the insanely popular ones, this does create kind of a sort of subconscious rift. You're like siloed into two different areas of the community. If there's a gradient, it definitely feels more like a blend of community. And that's true of a lot of different. Kind of going into another part of cons that I like working at, I really like providing the games and doing other sorts of community based activities. I think when there's opportunity for someone to just come and be and exist and have fun, having these community types of events that people like, whether it's human sized chess or playing yard games, or it's just a much more welcoming communal environment. We want to normalize things like reaching out and saying, hi, would you like to play some games? If someone was really excited to see a certain cosplayer or maybe a big show, that could be the highlight. But most of the time, the highlights for people at cons are going to be the experiences they had with other people or doing very specific things. And those often comes from like huge points of spontaneity. And so the best part of your weekend may be doing a free arts and craft station. The best part of your weekend, maybe the best part is at 2 a.m. playing Mafia or another board game with strangers that you never knew before. And like those are the small moments that can add to the whole experience of a con and just giving the con room to breathe. If everyone is just staying in their own clique and people don't talk to each other outside of that, then you're going to have people that are walking around in groups or by themselves, basically shielded by their phone, not being part of the community. And that's not on them. If the environment kind of pushes you towards that and doesn't make things welcoming, like, yeah, a phone is a security blanket. I mean, there have been times where I have literally gone on my phone, so I kind of was isolated and it was a sort of shield. I will say this with confidence, and I will always hold myself to this standard that I am never too good to talk to anyone, and I kind of view other people as the same way. So I don't really care what someone's follower count is. I will talk to them, whether that means they don't even have an Instagram or they have 30,000 people. I will talk to them the same. We're at a con here. No one's better than anyone else. Conventions are really not places just to be seen and to see other people. Sure, you can advertise yourself. Sure, you can show off your costume. None of that is bad. By prioritizing community over clout, we can definitely ensure that cons remain the vibrant third spaces they were meant to be, and with intentional efforts to be welcoming, inclusive, and supportive, we can keep conventions a space where everyone has a seat at the table, whether they're a seasoned veteran or they're there for the first time. Your own experience at a convention is just as valid as everyone else's. So as much as you have a right to do anything at a convention, everyone else has the exact same right. Thank you so much for watching. I know I can get a little meta with some of my discussions sometimes, but if you can't tell, I'm really passionate about this and passionate about, equity and inclusivity. A lot of lemurs look a lot like Part Zero. Primates? Is this what I look like? I don't remember where the lines are drawn on which classification of which type of animal, but cake pops. Not everything is a crab. Anthropological standpoint. That's my finger. Kinda. Eleanor Rigby. Do things keep evolving into crabs? Maybe. I don't know. I'm not a sociologist, so I don't know what the best term here is.